The email notification lit up my laptop screen at 35,000 feet. Employment terminated effective immediately. Signed by the same CEO who'd trusted me with our company's biggest deal just 3 days earlier. As I watched my $1.8 billion contract crumble in real time from my airplane seat, I realized they had no idea they'd just made the biggest mistake of their corporate lives. My name is Rachel Stone, and I thought I knew what betrayal felt like until I experienced it at 35,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean. The cabin around me was dark and quiet, filled with sleeping passengers who had no idea they were witnessing the end of my 12-year career. I was reviewing the final details of what would become the Morrison Industries deal when my laptop screen suddenly went black. At first, I thought it was just a technical glitch. These things happen on flights. But when I rebooted and tried to log back into our company system, the words on the screen made my blood freeze. Access denied. Contact system administrator. My company email was locked. My project files were gone. Even my internal messaging account had been wiped clean. Then came the email that shattered my world. The subject line was cold and direct. Employment termination, effective immediately. The sender was David Richardson, our CEO, the same man who had personally called me into his office just 3 days ago. He had looked me straight in the eye and said, "Rachel, you're the only person I trust to close this deal. The company's future depends on you." Now his message was brutal in its simplicity. Your employment with Apex Corporation is terminated effective immediately. Return all company property upon landing. Do not contact clients or partners. Security has been notified. I stared at the screen, reading the words again and again. 18 months of work. Countless late nights. 3 major corporations ready to sign contracts worth $1.8 billion. And they were firing me while I was trapped in an airplane seat. Unable to defend myself, unable to ask questions, unable to do anything but watch my career dissolve. The worst part wasn't the termination itself. It was the timing. David had waited until I was literally in the air, flying back from the final client meeting in London. He knew I couldn't call him. Couldn't argue. Couldn't fight back. This wasn't just firing an employee. This was a calculated attack designed to leave me powerless. But as I sat there in the darkness, surrounded by the gentle hum of jet engines, something strange happened. The shock began to fade, replaced by something colder and more focused. I started thinking about Marcus Richardson, David's nephew, who had joined our team 6 months ago. Fresh out of business school with 0 real experience, but somehow he'd been assigned to learn from me on the Morrison project. I remembered how he'd started asking detailed questions about my negotiation strategies. How he'd requested copies of all my client files for backup purposes. How he'd insisted on sitting in on every call, taking notes, studying my methods. At the time I thought he was just eager to learn. Now I realized he'd been studying me for a very different reason. They thought they were clever. Fire me mid-flight so I couldn't sabotage anything. Let Marcus take over using everything he'd learned from watching me. Present it as a smooth transition to the clients. But there was one thing they didn't know. One detail that would make their perfect plan crumble like a house of cards. I reached into my carry-on bag and pulled out a second laptop. The black laptop hummed to life with a soft blue glow, and I felt my first genuine smile in hours. This wasn't company property. This was mine, loaded with 5 years of proprietary research, client psychology profiles, and negotiation frameworks that I'd developed entirely on my own time. David Richardson had just fired the architect, but he'd forgotten that architects always keep their own blueprints. 3 months ago, I'd started to notice the subtle changes in how David treated me. Meetings that I'd normally lead were suddenly being co-led by Marcus. My project reports were being edited before going to the board. When I suggested new strategies, David would pause and ask, "What does Marcus think about this approach?" The writing was on the wall, but I'd hoped I was being paranoid. I wasn't paranoid. I was being prepared. While Marcus had been learning my current methods, I'd been quietly developing something far more valuable. Sterling Solutions, my own consulting firm. The paperwork was filed, the business account was open, and I'd even had 3 separate lawyers review everything to ensure there were no legal conflicts. What started as a safety net had become my secret weapon. The Morrison deal wasn't just another contract. It was built on a negotiation framework that I'd created from scratch, refined through dozens of smaller deals, and legally protected under my personal intellectual property filings. Every risk assessment, every contingency plan, Every psychological pressure point was my original work. Marcus might have observed me using these techniques, but he didn't understand the underlying principles that made them effective. As I opened my encrypted files, I could see the beautiful complexity of what I'd built. The Morrison framework wasn't just about closing deals, it was about understanding what each party really wanted beneath their stated positions. Catherine Walsh at Morrison Industries needed to prove to her board that she could deliver innovative solutions. James Anderson at Technova was fighting internal skeptics who thought the deal was too risky. Robert Stevens at Pinnacle Financial was under pressure to show growth in new markets. Marcus knew none of this. He'd seen the surface-level negotiations, but he'd never understood the deep psychological work that made them successful. Without that understanding, he was just a kid with expensive notes trying to conduct a symphony. I began typing, crafting 3 carefully worded emails to Catherine, James, and Robert. Not aggressive, not desperate, just professional messages letting them know that the original architect of their deal framework was now available for direct consultation. I didn't mention Apex Corporation. I didn't mention David Richardson. I simply offered my expertise as an independent consultant. The plane began its descent toward Boston Logan Airport. Around me, other passengers were stirring, gathering their belongings, preparing to return to their normal lives. But my life was no longer normal. In the span of 6 hours, I'd gone from senior executive to unemployed consultant. The strange thing was, I felt lighter than I had in months. As the wheels touched down, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Rachel, this is Marcus. David asked me to reach out. We need to talk about the Morrison transition. Can you call me when you land?" I deleted the message without responding. Then I sent my 3 emails to Catherine, James, and Robert, each with the same simple subject line: alternative implementation strategy available. By the time I reached baggage claim, my phone was already ringing. The first domino fell at exactly 8:15 in the morning, and I watched it happen from my hotel room overlooking Boston Harbor. Catherine Walsh from Morrison Industries was on the phone, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Rachel, thank God you're answering. We just got out of an emergency legal meeting, and we have a serious problem." I sipped my coffee calmly, already knowing what she was about to tell me. "What kind of problem, Catherine?" "Our lawyers reviewed the contract structure overnight. They discovered that the entire negotiation framework we agreed to is built on proprietary methodology that belongs to someone who no longer works for Apex Corporation. Without the original creator, we can't guarantee the technical integration will work properly." "That's concerning," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "What did David Richardson say when you brought this up?" Catherine's laugh was bitter. "David tried to convince us that his nephew Marcus created the framework. But Marcus couldn't even explain the basic risk assessment protocols when we pressed him for details. He kept referring to notes and saying he'd get back to us." I set down my coffee cup and opened my laptop. "Catherine, I need to tell you something. I am the original creator of that framework. I developed it over 5 years, and it's legally protected under my personal intellectual property rights." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. Then Catherine's voice came back, sharper and more focused. "Are you telling me that Apex Corporation fired the one person who could actually deliver on their promises?" "That appears to be the case." "Can you still implement the framework independently?" "Through Sterling Solutions, yes. The methodology remains the same, but the execution would be cleaner without corporate interference." Within an hour, James Anderson from Technova had called with similar concerns. His technical team had tried to review the integration specs with Marcus, but the young man couldn't answer basic questions about data security protocols. "Rachel, we agreed to this deal based on your personal assurances during our London meeting. If you're no longer involved, we need to seriously reconsider our position." The third call came from Robert Stevens at Pinnacle Financial. His board had voted to pause all agreements until they could get clarity on technical support and intellectual property rights. "Rachel, I'm going to be direct with you. We trust your expertise, not Apex Corporation's corporate structure. If you can deliver what you promised through your own company, we're interested in hearing your proposal." By noon, I had 3 separate invitations to submit new proposals through Sterling Solutions. The $1.8 billion deal that David Richardson thought he could steal was crumbling in his hands, and he didn't even know it yet. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "Rachel, please call me. David is freaking out. The clients are asking questions we can't answer. We need your help to transition this properly. I turned off my phone and opened a new document on my laptop. It was time to write 3 new proposals, each one tailored to what I knew these clients really needed. Not what Apex Corporation wanted to sell them, but what would actually solve their problems. David Richardson's voice cracked when he called me at 2:30 that afternoon, and I could hear the desperation bleeding through his usual corporate confidence. Rachel, we need to talk. This situation has gotten out of hand. Which situation is that, David? I asked, settling back into my hotel room chair with a clear view of the harbor. The clients are pulling out. Morrison Industries just sent a termination notice. Technova is demanding a full refund of their advance payments. Pinnacle Financial's lawyers are talking about breach of contract. You have to help us fix this. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. David, I'm confused. Yesterday you fired me via email while I was on a plane. Today you're asking for my help. Which version of reality are we operating in? Look, maybe the timing wasn't ideal, but we can work something out. I'm prepared to offer you a consultant position. Good pay, flexible schedule, and you can work directly with Marcus to ensure a smooth transition. The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted me to train his nephew to use my own proprietary methods, then disappear quietly while they took credit for my work. That's an interesting offer, David. But I have a better idea. Why don't you explain to the clients how Marcus developed the Morrison framework? I'm sure they'd love to hear about his innovative approach to risk assessment. David's voice got harder. Rachel, don't be naive. You signed a non-compete agreement. You can't just steal our clients and start your own company. I'm not stealing anything, David. I'm offering my personal expertise to companies who need it. And you might want to have your lawyers review that non-compete more carefully. It specifically excludes intellectual property that I developed independently. That's not how this works. Those clients belong to Apex Corporation. No, David. Those clients trusted me personally. They agreed to work with Apex Corporation because I vouched for the company's ability to deliver. Now that I'm gone, they're questioning whether that delivery is possible. At 3 o'clock my phone rang again. This time it was Thomas Bradley, Apex Corporation's head lawyer. His tone was formal but strained. Rachel, we need to discuss your recent communications with Morrison Industries, Technova, and Pinnacle Financial. David believes you're interfering with existing contracts. Thomas, I appreciate the call, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. I haven't interfered with anything. I've simply made myself available as an independent consultant to companies who have expressed concerns about Apex Corporation's ability to deliver on their promises. That sounds like tortious interference to me. Really? Because it sounds like business development to me. These companies reached out to me after discovering that the person who created their contract framework was no longer available through Apex Corporation. I'm offering them a solution to their problem. Thomas's voice became more cautious. What kind of solution? Sterling Solutions can implement the Morrison framework directly. Same methodology, same timeline, but without the corporate bureaucracy that's been slowing down the process. The clients get exactly what they were promised, just through a different vendor. You can't use Apex Corporation's intellectual property. Thomas, I think you need to check your files more carefully. The Morrison framework is my intellectual property, developed on my own time and legally protected under my personal filings. Apex Corporation was licensing my methodology, not owning it. The silence told me everything I needed to know. Thomas hadn't done his homework. He'd assumed that everything I created while employed belonged to the company, but he'd never actually reviewed the legal documentation. I'll need to research this further, he finally said. You do that. In the meantime, I have 3 proposals to finalize. By 4 o'clock I had signed letters of intent from all 3 companies. Morrison Industries wanted to terminate their Apex Corporation contract and sign directly with Sterling Solutions. Technova was prepared to transfer their advance payments to my new company. Pinnacle Financial's board had voted unanimously to move forward with the Sterling Solutions proposal. The $1.8 billion deal was alive again, but now it belonged to me. At 5:30, David called one final time. His voice was hollow, defeated. Rachel, you're destroying everything we've built together. No, David. You destroyed it when you decided that loyalty was a one-way street. You thought you could steal my work, fire me without warning, and then ask for my help when things went wrong. You thought Marcus could replace me because he'd watched me work for 6 months. He's a smart kid. He would have learned. Maybe. But that's not the point. The point is that you valued convenience over competence, politics over performance, and nepotism over merit. You made your choice, and now you're living with the consequences. The company will be ruined. People will lose their jobs. Good people will find new opportunities. The rest will learn that actions have consequences. I hung up and blocked his number. Then I opened my laptop and began drafting employment offers for the 3 best people from my old team. They deserved better than David Richardson's version of corporate leadership. The war was over before it had really begun. The news broke at 6:47 in the morning, and I watched David Richardson's world collapse in real time through my laptop screen. The Business Journal headline read, "Apex Corporation stock plummets as major clients abandon ship." The article was brutal, detailing how 3 Fortune 500 companies had simultaneously terminated their contracts and moved to a mysterious new firm called Sterling Solutions. I was sitting in my new office space, a modest but professional suite I'd rented just hours after signing the client agreements. The irony wasn't lost on me. While David was probably having his 3rd panic attack of the week, I was calmly setting up the business infrastructure that would deliver what he'd promised but could never actually provide. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Mitchell, my former colleague and one of the best project managers I'd ever worked with. "Rachel, what the hell is happening? David just called an emergency all-hands meeting. He's talking about lawsuits and corporate espionage. Are you okay?" I typed back quickly, "I'm fine, Sarah. In fact, I'm better than fine. Are you free for lunch today? I have a job offer you might be interested in." The response came back immediately, "Yes. I can't take another day of this chaos. Marcus is walking around like he owns the place, but he can't even explain basic project timelines to the clients who haven't fled yet." That was the confirmation I'd been waiting for. The talented people at Apex Corporation were ready to jump ship, and I was about to give them a lifeboat. By 10 o'clock, I had received calls from 5 different news outlets wanting to know about Sterling Solutions and how we'd managed to steal such high-profile clients. I gave the same response to each reporter. Sterling Solutions offers the same technical expertise that these clients were promised, but with more direct access to decision-makers and faster implementation timelines. We're not stealing clients, we're providing solutions. The 3rd call came from Maria Santos at Business Weekly, and she asked the question I'd been preparing for. "Ms. Stone, sources tell us that you developed the technical framework these clients are using while you were employed at Apex Corporation. How do you respond to allegations that you're using stolen intellectual property?" Maria, I appreciate the question and I'm happy to clarify. The Morrison framework was developed by me personally on my own time, and is legally protected under my individual intellectual property filings. Apex Corporation was licensing my methodology, not owning it. When they terminated my employment, they also terminated their license to use my proprietary systems. Can you prove that? Absolutely. I have 5 years of documentation, including timestamps, version histories, and legal filings that predate my work at Apex Corporation. This isn't stolen property, it's my life's work. At 11:30, Thomas Bradley called again, but this time his tone was different. Less aggressive, more resigned. "Rachel, we've completed our legal review. You're right about the intellectual property. David never secured ownership of your frameworks through the proper channels." "I know, Thomas. I tried to explain that to him yesterday. He wants to negotiate a licensing agreement. Apex Corporation would pay Sterling Solutions to use the Morrison framework for future deals." I almost laughed. "Thomas, let me make sure I understand this correctly. David fired me to steal my work, discovered he couldn't actually use it without me, watched his biggest clients leave, and now he wants to pay me for the privilege of using my own methods." "That's essentially correct, yes. Tell David I'll consider it. My licensing fee is $5 million per year, plus a percentage of all deals closed using my framework. Non-negotiable." The silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. "Rachel, that's more than David's entire annual salary. Then maybe he should have thought about that before he decided to fire the person who created his company's most valuable asset." Meanwhile, Marcus Richardson had been making his own moves. According to Sarah, he'd been calling clients directly, trying to convince them that he was the real architect of their deals. The results were predictably disastrous. Catherine Walsh from Morrison Industries had actually laughed at him during one call, asking him to explain the psychological principles behind the negotiation strategy. When Marcus couldn't provide a coherent answer, Catherine had hung up and immediately called me to confirm that Sterling Solutions could start implementation the following Monday. By 2 o'clock, I had hired Sarah Mitchell as my operations director and Michael Chen as my technical lead. Both had resigned from Apex Corporation that morning, citing irreconcilable differences with current management. Within hours, I had a core team of people who understood both the technical requirements and the client relationships necessary to deliver on our promises. The afternoon brought more chaos at Apex Corporation. According to industry sources, David had called another emergency meeting, this one with the board of directors. He was apparently trying to convince them that the client departures were temporary, that Marcus could rebuild the relationships, and that Sterling Solutions was just a minor setback. The board wasn't buying it. By 4 o'clock, rumors were circulating that David was being pressured to resign. His handling of the situation had cost the company not just the Morrison deal, but their reputation in the industry. Other potential clients were now questioning whether Apex Corporation could actually deliver on their promises. At 5:15, I received a call from an unexpected source, Marcus Richardson himself. His voice was shaky, desperate. "Rachel, I need to talk to you. This whole situation has gotten completely out of control. What can I do for you, Marcus? I made a mistake. I thought I could handle the client relationships, but I was wrong. I don't understand the technical details like you do. I was just trying to learn from the best, and now everything is falling apart." For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt a tiny spark of sympathy. Marcus was young, ambitious, and probably pressured by his uncle to take on responsibilities he wasn't ready for. But sympathy doesn't excuse poor judgment. "Marcus, I appreciate your honesty, but this isn't about technical details. This is about trust. Your uncle fired me to give you my job, and the clients noticed. They don't trust people who advance through family connections instead of merit." "I know. I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do to fix this?" "You can learn from this experience. Build your own expertise instead of trying to inherit someone else's. And next time, speak up when you see something unfair happening, even if it benefits you." The conversation ended there, but it gave me hope that maybe some good could come from this mess. Not everyone at Apex Corporation was corrupt. Some were just caught in a bad situation created by their leadership. 9 months later, I stood in the conference room of Sterling Solutions' permanent headquarters, watching Catherine Walsh sign the final documents for Phase 2 of our partnership. The original Morrison deal had been completed 3 months ahead of schedule and 20% under budget. Now we were expanding into international markets, with a contract value that had grown to $2.4 billion. "Rachel, I have to tell you something," Catherine said as she set down her pen. "Working with Sterling Solutions has been the smoothest major implementation I've ever experienced. Your team delivered exactly what you promised when you promised it, with none of the corporate drama we were expecting." James Anderson nodded from across the table. "The technical integration was flawless. Our IT department actually sent compliments up to the executive level, which has never happened before during a major system change." Robert Stevens was reviewing the financial projections on his tablet. "The cost savings have exceeded our most optimistic estimates. We're looking at a 40% improvement in operational efficiency, and that's just in the first quarter." I smiled, but my mind was elsewhere. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the Apex Corporation building in the distance. Yesterday, I'd received news that the company had been sold to a private equity firm for less than half of its value from a year ago. David Richardson had been forced out 6 months ago, and Marcus had quietly transferred to a different company where he was reportedly doing good work as a junior analyst, a position much better suited to his actual skill level. "There's something else," Catherine continued. "Morrison Industries is considering a major expansion into the European market. Would Sterling Solutions be interested in developing a comprehensive strategy for that launch?" Before I could answer, my assistant knocked on the door. "Miss Stone, there's a Jennifer Martinez here to see you. She says she has an appointment." I had forgotten about the interview. "Please send her in." Jennifer Martinez walked into the room with the kind of nervous energy I recognized from my own early career. Fresh out of graduate school, armed with impressive credentials but no real-world experience, She'd been working as a junior consultant at a mid-sized firm, but her cover letter had demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking I valued. "Ms. Martinez, thank you for coming in. I know this is unusual timing, but I thought you should meet some of our clients." I gestured toward the three executives. "Catherine, James, Robert, this is Jennifer Martinez. She's interviewing for a position as our new business development manager." Jennifer's eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly. "It's an honor to meet you all. I've been following the Sterling Solutions partnership announcements, and the results have been remarkable." James leaned forward. "What interests you most about this industry, Jennifer?" "The complexity of the relationships," she replied without hesitation. "Technology is just the tool. The real challenge is understanding what each party actually needs and finding ways to align those needs productively. Ms. Stone's framework demonstrates that perfectly. It's not just about closing deals, it's about creating sustainable value for everyone involved." Catherine and Robert exchanged glances. After 20 minutes of conversation, Jennifer had impressed all three of them with her insights and questions. When she left for the second part of her interview process, Catherine turned to me with a smile. "Hire her," she said simply. "She reminds me of someone I used to know." That evening I called Jennifer personally to offer her the position. Her response was immediate. "Yes, absolutely yes. When can I start?" "Monday morning. And Jennifer, I want you to know that at Sterling Solutions, your ideas will be credited to you, your contributions will be recognized, and your career will be built on merit, not politics." The silence told me she was fighting back tears. "Thank you, Miss Stone. You have no idea how much that means to me." After hanging up, I walked to my office window and looked out at the city lights. In the distance, I could see the Apex Corporation building, now mostly dark except for a few scattered windows. David Richardson's office, which used to stay lit until late into the night, was permanently empty. I didn't feel vindicated or victorious. I felt something more valuable: purpose. Sterling Solutions wasn't just a successful business. It was proof that competence, integrity, and respect for people could create something more powerful than fear, politics, and corporate manipulation. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Mitchell. "Rachel, I just wanted to say thank you. For the first time in my career, I actually look forward to coming to work." That message was worth more than any contract, any revenge, or any vindication. I had built something that mattered, something that treated people the way they deserved to be treated. The foundation I'd created after being torn down was stronger than anything David Richardson had ever built, because it was built on trust instead of fear. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. Sometimes it's creation. Sometimes it's building something so fundamentally better that everyone who tried to diminish you has to watch it succeed while their own house crumbles. If you've ever been fired, betrayed, or had your work stolen, remember this. They can take your job, but they can't take your knowledge. They can steal your ideas, but they can't steal your ability to create new ones. They can destroy your position, but they can't destroy your principles. The foundation you build after they tear you down will always be stronger than the one they tried to keep you from reaching.